Hello everybody, my name is Clantus and welcome to my new YouTube channel where I'm going to be speaking all things true crime. So for the longest time guys, I've been wanting to create a channel like this one because I enjoy true crime for some strange reasons. I find the human mind to be very fascinating, and there are these type of people that I try to understand what went wrong. Some people, they like to give excuses about the person's background, why they commit the crimes that they have committed. That's besides the point. Today's case is my first one and is a little bit messed up, if not messed up at all. It kind of as well exposed a lot of things about our criminal justice system as well as our rehabilitation or correctional services system that was all flawed due to this case. And as a result, I believe that South Africa tried to correct things so that something like this don't happen in the future. But again, we learn from mistakes in order for these mistakes or history not repeating itself. Otherwise, we are going to be seen as fools. So in today's case is the case of the notorious Annanias Mathe. Let me first start by saying that Annanias Mathe was born in 1976. Unfortunately, I tried to hunt down his date of birth, but the only thing that I get is he was born in December of 1976 or something of that nature. If you guys do know what his date of birth is, please comment down below and let me know which date Annanias Mathe was born. Well, Annanias Mathe is a little bit difficult to pronounce, so now and again I may say Mr. Mathe or I might even say Annanias. Whichever way it's pronounced, hey guys, let's flow with it. It would have been very interesting to know which star sign he also belongs. I hope he's not Cancer. Please don't tell me he's Cancer. I'm definitely intrigued by the littlest information about the perpetrator as much as the entire crime or the reason why he commits these crimes. So here's a little background about Annanias Mathe. Annanias Mathe, like I said, he hails from Mozambique. He came to South Africa in 1999. So like all economic migrants to South Africa, Annanias Mathe came to South Africa for greener pastures in 1999. The moment Annanias Mathe landed in South Africa, he started committing a series of crimes, particularly house break-ins. So between the time Annanias Mathe came to South Africa in 1999 to 2002, he has not committed any violent crimes against his victims. So he would just simply break into your house and steal valuables that he believes would help his cause in whatever it was in order to make a living and send some money back home. I also found out that Annanias Mathe worked as a member of the Mozambique Defense Armed Force, and later on it turned out that it was not necessarily true, but there was something really strange about the way he conducted his crimes. He did seem to be a person who has some sort of specialized training, which we are gonna get to at a later stage when the prison officials basically describes who Annanias Mathe according to what they have seen about him. So back in Mozambique, Annanias Mathe is married to 2 women. He's in a polygamous marriage. He has 7 children. So one of the things that kind of confused me when I was looking into his background, they say he has 7 children and 2 grandchildren. Now, how old was he when he became a grandparent at this point? Because as far as I could tell, he was in his early 30s, either 31 or 32, the latest 33, and he was already a grandfather of 2 kids. So how old were his kids when they gave birth to kids that made Annanias Mathe a grandfather? So I'm blabbing on, but it's just something that I thought that was very interesting to know, but that's besides the point. So Annanias Mathe lived a completely different life when he was in Mozambique in the presence of his wife and also people that know him, because they describe him as a man of principle, quiet, secretive, as well as very kind. He loved his children as well as his wives, and everybody around him also respected and loved him. He was never an intimidating man. You could have knocked a person with a feather if you said Annanias Mathe was was violent. That is how nice of a person he was. Furthermore, they say Annanias Mathe never touched cigarettes, alcohol, or even drugs for that matter. So what triggered him into becoming the man that we know him today? Nobody knows. Oh, before I forget, he also was a devoted churchgoer. And he used to send about 100 Rand to his family every single month back in 1999. And according to the Mozambican Metallical, it was around 150,000 Metallical, I suppose. From what I could gather, that means 100 Rand back then could indeed take care of a family of about 9 to 11 people. And today, 100 Rand means absolutely nothing. You can only get about literally 2 or 3 items in today's times because food has become seriously expensive here in South Africa, I suppose elsewhere in the world as well. So let's get into Annanias Mathe's criminal activity or criminal life here in South Africa. So before we get to that point, Annanias Mathe every single December, like most economic immigrants to South Africa, will go home in December for the December holidays and to be with their families. They will return in January, just like Annanias Mathe returns to South Africa every single January. So remember, Annanias Mathe has not been violent or had any violent tendency from the time he arrived here in South Africa in 1999 to 2002. So on the 29th of August 1999, freshly off the boat, Annanias Mathe goes and breaks into the house of Diane and Alban Hirsch's house, where he steals the family music system as well as the family car. So upon realizing that he has broken into a house, stole a car, and still did not get caught, he then continues to break into more houses around the Gauteng province. So it is said that Annanias Mathe, whenever he went to break into homes, he would carry on his right hand a pistol and on his left hand a torch. The reason why he did that is that when he breaks into a house and he comes across the victims in the house, he will blind them with the torch and then he will point a gun against their head and then he will instruct them exactly what to do. Mr. Mathe's modus operandi or MO was to break into homes during the course of the night, either in the wee hours of the morning of 1 a.m. or 5 a.m. or any time in between that, because he knows that his victims are asleep. The funny part as well that I could not really understand why he would break into homes of people that are already in the house if the whole point was to steal items or valuables from these homes. Why couldn't he break in during the day when nobody was at home? I discovered that he would study the homes of his victims, and he needed to make sure that the victim either lived alone, it was a woman, as well as the person was white. I don't know why he was targeting white people. My assumption is that he may have thought, or maybe he was told, that white people in South Africa are wealthy and then those are the only people you should target. Or whether his crimes were racially motivated, I don't know. Like, there are some people, thieves, who believe that you should not steal from your own race, or rather steal from other races or things of that nature. Guys, I don't know. But I'm just assuming why he was targeting white people, particularly white females. And he also made sure that the places or the houses that he broke into were in affluent suburbs of Gauteng. Oh, the last thing that I forgot to mention was that Annanias Mathe also carried with him poisoned meat in case the homes that he would break into have dogs. Remember, he would study the house to check if the house has any animals that may disturb him while he breaks into the house, because he did not want his victim to be startled and woken up by the dogs keep on barking. So he would just throw a poisoned meat at the dogs and then they would eat and die, and then he would be able to enter the house undetected. So Annanias Mathe's first violent crime was when he broke into the house of Tracy Jacobson Gilbert's house, and Tracy was in her bedroom with her son, And when she woke up, she was blinded by the torch. Remember, he would carry a torch. He blinded her with the torch while she was still disoriented from waking up. And then he pointed a gun at her head and told her what he was going to do to her. Basically, he was telling her that I am going to rape you, and do not shout, don't cry, don't do anything stupid that will make me to shoot you. So while Annanias Mathe was busy undressing, basically unzipping his pants, Tracy decided to fight off Annanias Mathe. So while she was busy screaming, scratching, and kicking Annanias Mathe, Tracy's little son woke up, frightened and traumatized, ran and hid in the bathroom. Basically, he locked himself in the bathroom while Tracy was busy fighting off Annanias Mathe. I can just imagine what was going through Tracy's mind. Obviously, you are a mother of a little boy. All that you could think of is the safety of your child. So Tracy continued to kick and scream and scratch Annanias Mathe. So one of Tracy's kick hit Mathe's hand that held the gun, and a gunshot went off, shooting Tracy on her left breast. So Mathe continues to fight, making sure that he gets to rape Tracy, but Tracy put up a strong fight. The fight basically took them to the passageway, and Tracy, for some reason, managed to get Annanias Mathe as close to the door as possible because her house had burglar gate. Burglar gate basically is security gate. Here in South Africa, most houses have burglar gates. So basically, we are all gated homes here in South Africa. So you're going to have high walls with gates, and then if you come into the yard, our home doors as well as windows are all burglar gated, so to kind of like keep away people like Annanias Mathe from breaking into our homes. So eventually Tracy managed to get Annanias Mathe pushed out of the house, and she shut the burglar gate. So while she shut the burglar gate, she locked it, and as she was trying to shut the door, Annanias Mathe shoots 2 more shots at Tracy, which hits Tracy on her left lung as well as on her shoulder. Tracy, at this point in time, still has no idea that she had been shot the first time. At this point, she already has 2 bullets launched in her body, one on her left breast, one on her left lung, and another one on her shoulder. She had no idea that she was shot. The only time she realized that she was shot is when she looked down on her nightie and she saw that her nightdress was covered in blood. At this point in time, she calls the police and the ambulance. They take her to the hospital. They do emergency operation on her to remove the bullets. Unfortunately, the bullet that was launched on her left lung was too close to her spinal cord, and as a result, the doctors decided to leave that bullet alone. To this very day, Tracy lives with a bullet launched close to her spinal cord on her left lung. The thing that really got me was the fact that when Tracy managed to push Mathe outside, she locked the burglar gate. Mathe shouted at her, telling her what she was doing was wrong. It was not right of her to shut the burglar gate at him. Like, who does that? You want to rape somebody and you're telling them that by kicking and screaming and defending themselves, they are doing something wrong? That is another level of craziness. So in 2003, Annanias Mathe continues on his violent crime. At this point in time, he breaks into a home in Northcliffe of Johannesburg. It's one of the posh suburbs here in Johannesburg. He breaks into a house of a 19-year-old teenage girl, and he successfully rapes her. The rape was reported by the girl, and 10 days later, Annanias Mathe got arrested in Alberton, east of Gauteng. So the reason why Mathe was caught 10 days later was not because of the rape, but because he was caught with poisoned meat in his home. Remember, when Mathe went to do his crime sprees, he carried 3 weapons. A gun on his right hand, a blinding torch on his left hand, and poison for the dogs in case the homes that he intended to break in had dogs. So after Annanias Mathe was taken to the police station, for some reasons that nobody knows, he was released and no charges were brought against him. So after his release, Annanias Mathe continued on his modus operandi by making sure that he was breaking into more houses. You will find out a little bit later what he was doing with these items and what he was doing back home in Mozambique with the money that he was making in South Africa. It will upset you. On the 24th of April 2004, Annanias Mathe gets arrested. Why does he get arrested? Was because while he was breaking into these homes and stealing valuables and goods from these homes, these goods were reported to the police, and then Annanias Mathe happened to get caught by the police with the reported stolen items, and he was taken to the Pretoria Magistrate Court for his prelim hearing. So indeed, Annanias Mathe does greet the magistrate. And so when Annanias Mathe, after being released on 500 bail and his trial date was set, Annanias Mathe was nowhere to be found on the first day of his trial. Why? Because he was continuing on his crime spree by breaking into people's homes and stealing their valuables, their vehicles, with no consequences or detention from the police. At this point in time, the police still have no idea who is this person that is breaking into homes and raping women. They were not connecting the dots. Yet they've had this man twice under their noses, and still they did not connect him with all the other crimes that he has been committing. The reason why the police have not yet connected the dots, so in most cases here in South Africa, here's a little side note. So in South Africa, most economic immigrants, they are undocumented foreigners. Basically what this means is if you are a documented immigrant, that means the authorities have your fingerprints, they have your photo, they have basically all of your information about where you come from, your address of where you come from, etc. and so on. So if you are going to commit crimes in South Africa and you are undocumented, your fingerprint, whenever the police lift it, they will not know who exactly this fingerprint belongs to because you are undocumented. And it so happens that undocumented criminal foreigners are the most dangerous here in South Africa because they know that if they commit these heinous crimes, they are not going to get caught. And that's exactly what happened with Annanias Mathe. So I thought, let me give you a bit of a background about how South Africa's foreign affairs is handled. Basically is non-existent because of corruption. So while the police were busy investigating all these crimes, the 19-year-old girl's rape, Tracy's attempted murder, as well as all the other housebreakings, the police still have not linked him to any of these crimes from 1999 to 2004. So instead of Annanias Mathe standing trial, so in August of 2004, at around 1 o'clock to about 3 o'clock in the morning, Annanias Mathe breaks into the house of Charles and Julia Pringle. Now, the reason why Annanias Mathe had arrived at 1 o'clock and committed the crime around 3:30 was because the Pringle home had two dogs. And these dogs will just bark non-stop. I don't understand why the Pringles did not wake up to go and investigate why the dogs were barking. They just continued sleeping. So anyways, Annanias Mathe was waiting for these dogs to stop barking. He then reached out into the bag that he carried poisoned meat, threw the meat over the walls, and the dogs went and took a bite of the meat, and suddenly there was silence. So basically, before he would actually enter the house, he would wait a little while until he knows for sure that the dogs have died, and then he would then climb over the walls and then proceeds to break into the house. So at around 3:30 in the morning, Annanias Mathe now breaks into the house after the dogs have died and proceeds to take the car keys of the Pringles, and then he proceeds to their bedroom where Charles, who said he was a very large man, and Annanias Mathe, if you have not seen any of his pictures, I'm going to show them during the course of this video. He's a very thin framed man with a head that is shaped, okay, never mind. And Charles began to tell him to leave the house because he could tell that this is a break-in. And Annanias Mathe's MO, as you know, a gun in his right hand and a blinding torch on his left hand, and he proceeds to blind Charles, and Charles continues to shout to tell him to leave his home. And so to shut him up, Annanias Mathe shoots Charles on the collarbone, and Charles falls back onto his bed, and Annanias Mathe proceeds to run away and drove with the family car, which was a Mercedes-Benz, as I understood. And when Annanias Mathe drove from the Pringles home, he drove to Parkhurst, another posh suburb of Johannesburg, where he gets and break into the house of a 20-year-old woman. He unfortunately rapes her and steals her goods, and then he drives a little bit down the road and does the same thing, break into the house, steal their valuables, and then he proceeded to drive to Pretoria. So of course Charles got up out the bed, ran after Mathe, and when he got to the yard, he saw both of his dogs have unfortunately died. It is said that the poison that he used was insecticide, and he laced the meat with the insecticide, and the insecticide was so strong that even the dogs of Charles did not finish chewing upon their death. So the death was instantaneous and possibly, hopefully, was also painless. I don't know. And so Charles was very shocked to see his dogs dead. And I think it's just so cruel what he did to those dogs. It's just horrible. So 3 months later, on the 8th of December 2004, Annanias Mathe drives back to Parkhurst, where he breaks into a home and rapes another woman. 8 days later, on the 16th of December 2004, Annanias Mathe rapes yet another woman in Pretoria. The lady was asleep in her bedroom when Annanias Mathe broke into her house. She fortunately heard the noise, and she tried to investigate to see what was happening. She did see the torch flashing about her study in her house, and she went back into her bedroom to sort of like hide. And unfortunately, Annanias Mathe must have heard her. He opened the door and realized that she was there, and she was wearing her nightie. Annanias Mathe proceeded to take her hairdryer, used the cord to tie up her feet, told her to shut up, don't say anything. On her bedside, Heidi is her name, had a stereo. She had an electrical stereo, I suppose, to listen to news or radio while she falls asleep at night, something that I also do sometimes. So he used the cord of that small stereo and tied up her hands. And Annanias Mathe sort of like left the room to go collect a knife, and he came back and then told this lady that he was going to rape her, and he proceeded to ask her to spread her legs. And of course, the lady's legs were bound together. She said, how am I going to do that when you have tied my legs? The reason why this lady was compliant was because she was not sure how many other people were in her house, and so her priority was to save her life and not do anything that might get this man to call his buddies to tie her down or pin her down, or whatever the case that she was thinking at the time. And Annanias Mathe proceeded to use the butcher knife to cut off the cord that bound her legs, and he proceeded to rape her. I can just imagine how this woman must have felt. I mean, begging for your life, begging not to be harmed, and this man continues to do that. He has no remorse. He has no empathy. He has no feelings. He's a monster. That's as far as I can describe this guy. So while Mathe was busy raping Heidi, he heard a car pull up. And he stopped raping Heidi, and then he ran downstairs to investigate who this car belongs to that just pulled up. When he got outside, he realized that it was a security car, but the security vehicle had left. It did not park at the house of Heidi. So what he decided to do, he went back to the house, ordered Heidi to tell him how her security gate works, and Heidi told him how the security gates work. So while Heidi was busy lying there in total fear, she hears her car pull out. So basically, Annanias Mathe had just drove away out of her house with her car. and he drove to yet another location to commit more similar crimes. So of course, Heidi does report the entire ordeal, and that is when the police realize that they have a serial rapist on their hands and they need to catch him as soon as possible before he did more damage to more women. So while they were busy investigating Heidi's house, they find one fingerprint on a light bulb which belonged to Annanias Mathe. So remember, every crime scene that the police get to, they do lift fingerprints, and they realize the fingerprints that they have been lifting in all the other homes that have been broken into belong to the same person, and therefore that is why they announced him as a serial rapist and warned every woman in South Africa, particularly in Gauteng, to ensure that they are protected. They close their doors, windows, and make sure they don't allow anybody into their homes. So when Annanias Mathe heard of these announcements, he decides to leave Gauteng and proceeds to the province called Limpopo, which is on the northern side of South Africa, where his modus operandi continues there. But because Limpopo is not necessarily like Gauteng, because Gauteng is the economic hub of Africa, where it has like wealthy people, he decides to detour and goes to another province called Northwest, where he continues these crimes. But I guess those two provinces that he tried to run away to continue his crimes were a little bit boring. He came back to South Africa, and guess which suburb he came back to? Yep, you guessed it right, Parktown. For some reason, Annanias Mathe and Parktown are like buddies, and he decided to go back to Parktown to commit more of these crimes that he's been committing. Unfortunately, at this point in time, Annanias Mathe was a violent man. So remember I said earlier that most economic migrants to South Africa are undocumented. So the fingerprint that they lifted at Heidi's house, the fingerprint led them to a man called Khoza. And when they realized that actually that is not the man who committed these crimes, because his fingerprint were different from that of the ones that they've been getting in these houses where they lift fingerprints at the crime scene. The reason why was because the passport that led them to this Khoza man was a fake passport, meaning that Annanias Mathe for some reason got hold of Khoza's passport, and then he removed Khoza's face on the passport and placed his own, and the wrong man was arrested as a result. So basically, here's another side note. Most undocumented immigrants here in South Africa will steal South Africans' identity documents. They will basically remove the picture of a South African and place their own, either on the green ID book, which we got as our identification, or on a South African citizen's passport. So that is how most of them would do. They would pose as a South African on a stolen identity document. I don't know if that makes sense, but basically they steal somebody's identity and they would just remove my picture, for example, and place their own picture. So if he commits crime, guess who gets arrested? Me, because my details are on my identification documents. So until I am able to prove beyond reasonable doubt that I'm not the one that committed that crime, unfortunately, many South Africans have actually found themselves incarcerated and convicted for crimes they did not commit, but being committed by undocumented foreigners. So on the 31st of January 2005, Annanias Mathe gets arrested in Kensington. Though he was asleep with a woman in his hideout, so a person or an informant informed the police of Annanias Mathe's whereabouts, because he for some reason suspected that he may be the serial rapist and housebreaker that the police were looking for. So he rattled on Annanias Mathe and he was caught at his girlfriend's house and he was arrested. So this happened little after he returned from Mozambique to South Africa. Remember I said most economic migrants, they leave South Africa in December and they come back in January. So Annanias Mathe had gone home for the December holidays, came back in January. On the 31st of January 2005, he gets arrested because he was snitched on and he was taken to the Johannesburg Central Police Station. At the Johannesburg Central Police Station, it is almost like a semi-maximum prison, but not necessarily one. If you know anything about South African history, you would know that the Johannesburg Central Police Station was where most of the political prisoners' torture would take place. Basically, they would even throw political prisoners from the 10th floor and they would torture them with electric shocks and all that sort of horrible things. If you can just read about this police station, you'll be shocked. You'll be completely shocked of the things that the apartheid government used to do to political prisoners there. So 3 months later, on the 2nd of April 2005, Annanias Mathe makes his first escape from his prison cell. So basically what he did, he broke the bars of his heating system as well as the legs of his bed and broke through the window of his prison cell. And he then from that point, he started creating a rope from his bedding as well as his clothing, and he threw the rope over the window and he climbed down. Then he climbed down. Again, if you look at the Johannesburg Central Police Station, it's basically a multiple story building. I think it's about 12 floors or something of that nature. And I think the prison cells are somewhere around the 10th, 11th or 12th floor. So he basically created a rope from his bedding to basically climb down using that. So as Annanias Mathe begins to climb down, he stopped halfway and he wrote on the window or on the wall of the police station, FU, basically a message that he left for the police officers or the prison warders or whatever the case was. He wrote FU and then he climbed down and then he disappeared into the crowds of Johannesburg. So after Annanias Mathe successfully escapes from almost a C-Max prison, he continues on his crime spree. Basically, he continues on his modus operandi, breaking into people's homes, stealing their valuables, their cars, and rape more women, and proceeds on to his next victims. Fortunately, in November of 2005, Annanias Mathe finally gets arrested. So if you've been paying attention throughout this story, you would note that Annanias Mathe still has not had his day in court, meaning he still has not stood trial yet for all the crimes that he's been committed to this point. So Annanias Mathe was linked to another rape that happened in Germiston. This one was so sadistic, I think, because when he broke into this house, he broke into a house of a girlfriend and a boyfriend, and he did his modus operandi by blinding the people with the torch and pointing the gun at their heads. So with this rape, he made the boyfriend of his victim watch while he was raping the woman. Who does that? So the poor guy was paralyzed with fear because Annanias Mathe was pointing a gun at him while he was busy raping his girlfriend. The fortunate part about the man was that he could clearly see Annanias Mathe and he was able to describe him to the police, how he looked like, that he was a skinny man, very small framed, a little bit small in size as well, and had a big head. So on the 6th of April 2006, Annanias Mathe is taken to C-Max prison in Pretoria. This is a maximum prison where no prisoner has ever escaped from C-Max. From the time it was built back in the apartheid days, the C-Max in Pretoria is built in such a way that it's impossible to escape from. You will find out how Annanias Mathe managed to actually escape, and he remains to this very day to be the only man to escape from an inescapable prison in South Africa. So while Annanias Mathe was in the C-Max prison in Pretoria, he attempted to escape. Unfortunately, his escape was unsuccessful because he got caught. Duh, is C-Max. So I thought. So 7 months later, on the 18th of November 2006, Annanias Mathe makes yet a second escape from C-Max prison in Pretoria, And this time he is successful. How did he do it? He took off all of his clothes and he was butt naked, and he smeared Vaseline or petroleum jelly all over his body to lubricate his body so that he's able to slid through the bars and make his escape. So let me give a justifiable description of how the C-Max prison looked like. So you have a C-Max prison. Number one, the prisoner is shackled both hands and both feet at all times, 24 hours a day. They are shackled both hands and feet, okay? And then they have a tiny little window that is a little bit higher up on their cell, and it is in 20 by 60 centimeter, meaning that it's really, really tiny for you to get through it. But Annanias Mathe, because he smeared Vaseline or petroleum jelly all over his body, he managed to slid through that window and through the iron bars, which were also 60 by 20 centimeter in measurement. Again, it is very important to note that Annanias Mathe was a small man, meaning he was really skinny. So after Annanias Mathe escapes from C-Max prison, it is said that Annanias Mathe, it's impossible that he would escape. He would have escaped from C-Max because, number one, like I had mentioned earlier on, all C-Max prisoners, they are shackled both hands and feet. So it's impossible that he would have been able to smear Vaseline all over his body. Number one, where would he have gotten the Vaseline from? Because that item is not allowed in C-Max, but he managed to get one. However, few sources did come forward and reported that actually Annanias Mathe did not do all this by himself. He was assisted by prison wardens. After Annanias Mathe bribed them with 80,000 rand between them, and that is how he managed to escape from C-Max prison, because it's impossible to escape from the Pretoria C-Max prison here in South Africa. So here's a little question for you. What do you think? Do you think he escaped or he bribed somebody to get out of C-Max prison? I know my answer because I have seen the Pretoria C-Max prison. Not that I've been in there, but I've heard people who have been there that it's actually inescapable, period. And so there is also another excuse that was done by the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services, Ben Skosana, that the C-Max prison in Pretoria was also understaffed and it only had 4 towers that was able to look after prisoners, and each tower only had 2 officials who would look after the prison. And it also happened that Annanias Mathe's prison cell was not necessarily regularly watched, and that is how he knew that he was not regularly watched and he was able to escape. I think that is just a poor excuse because you have very corrupt officials that were in that prison, that were in the C-Max. And I also discovered that these 2 wardens were actually fired. I don't know how I feel about that. I felt that they should not only have been fired, but also been charged, prosecuted, and convicted to aid and abet a very dangerous prisoner by helping him to escape C-Max prison. So once again, there was a manhunt for Annanias Mathe, and as you know, Annanias Mathe did not just sit and hide. He continued on his crime spree. You just escaped from the mouth of a crocodile, and there you still continue going back to the crocodile-infested river to swim? What is wrong with this man? And interestingly, Annanias Mathe was located several times by the police, but for some reason, he always managed to evade the police and continued on with his crime sprees. Another information to note, Annanias Mathe, because of the story being so huge, it became an international news, and the news landed back home in Mozambique, where Annanias Mathe was known as a rat, meaning that he always managed to escape. I think even in Mozambique he was committing crimes. I think that's how he perfected his art here in South Africa, because he was committing these similar crimes, I suppose, back in Mozambique, and Mozambicans, named him or dubbed him as the rat, and they always said it is difficult to pin a rat down. So after Annanias Mathe escaped from C-Max prison in Pretoria, he was now declared the most wanted man in South Africa. So this got top investigators wondering who exactly is Annanias Mathe. And that is when the investigators made a trip to Mozambique to find out exactly who this man was. And they went to his village of Shai in Mozambique, and they discovered that indeed Annanias Mathe had 2 wives. Some people say he had 3 wives, and he had 7 children and 2 grandchildren. And this is the part where I said you will get a little bit upset. So when they got to Annanias Mathe's home, they discovered that he was actually building a mansion with 6 bathrooms. Now that got me like seriously upset, that you come to South Africa, take advantage of our kindness and hospitality, rape our women and steal from their homes and steal their cars, and then you sell them only to go and build a mansion with 6 bathrooms. That's just how I felt when I read that. Like, you want to live in a mansion, and in order for you to live in a mansion, you go and you commit heinous crimes in another land? No. I don't have a mansion, but I make sure that every single morning I wake up and go and earn an honest living. Who knows, I may get so lucky someday that I will actually be able to make millions of rands and build my own mansion. Like, clean money, no rape committed, no house breaking, no stealing of other people's valuables, nothing, by hard work. Annanias Mathe. Interestingly, when the investigators also approached the Mozambican police and they started speaking about Annanias Mathe, they discovered that the police were actually becoming extremely hostile towards the investigators, because for some reason people say that the Mozambican police were in Annanias Mathe's pocket. So meaning that whenever Annanias Mathe committed crimes in Mozambique, the police would take bribes from him to make sure that his criminal activities are basically swept under the carpet. And so they lived through Annanias Mathe, and they were very upset to hear that he was being investigated. Some Mozambican police even went as far as shouting at the investigators, telling them that this is not South Africa. Go away, get away from Mozambique if you don't want to see something happening to you. So these are the Mozambican police basically threatening South African police, when the South African police actually wanted to know more about Annanias Mathe. Remember earlier on, I did say that Annanias Mathe was said to have worked for the Mozambican Defense Armed Forces, and it turns out that was a lie. So anyways, the investigators did go to his home, and they discovered Annanias Mathe had a mother. His mother was still alive. Unfortunately, his father had died. He also had a brother whom we're not quite sure if he was alive or not alive, because he was also taking care of his brother's children. So he had his own 7 children and 2 grandchildren, and on top of that, he was also taking care of his brother's children as well. So we don't know why he was taking care of his brother's children. Maybe he's unemployed, or he is incapable of, or maybe he's also dead. We don't know. Nothing is said about his brother. So on the 4th of December 2006, Annanias Mathe commits his last crime. He breaks into the house of Cameron Michael John. Cameron Michael John was in the house with her daughter. At 5:50 a.m., Annanias Mathe breaks into the house and discovered this woman and her daughter. So he orders the woman to do what he has been doing to all the other women. So with all the commotions that were happening in the house, Cameron's daughter wakes up and realizes that they have been invaded, and Annanias Mathe orders her to go lie down and face down if she does not want to get harmed. And the daughter does exactly that. Fortunately, Annanias Mathe does not touch Cameron, but instead he takes the family car and fled. So while he was fleeing, Cameron's car was fitted with a tracker or a GPS system, and she calls the GPS or the tracker company called Netstar or something of that nature. And the Netstar company basically started tracking the car, and they found that the car was stuck in Johannesburg, very heavy traffic, and a chopper was sent out to basically circulate the car, which they did. Upon realizing that there was a chopper circulating him, Annanias Mathe decided to flee on foot into an informal settlement, and the two security guards from the Netstar company started chasing Annanias Mathe on a van while Annanias Mathe was on foot, and he disappeared into the informal settlement nearby. And the helicopter continues to basically stalk Annanias Mathe because he looked distinctive. He was wearing a bright orange t-shirt, and the Netstar chopper was able to basically stalk him inside the informal settlement. So the chopper was able to report back to the two security officers who were now running on foot after Annanias Mathe. So while Annanias Mathe was running, he realized why the chopper was basically was stalking him was because of his bright orange t-shirt, which he removed and carried it on his hand. He disappeared into one of the informal settlement house, and in the house he met two little girls. The father was out, I think, and then when he came back inside, the girls started pointing at, there's a man in this house. I don't know what happened inside the house, because when there's two security officers being informed by the chopper that this is the house he had ran into, the man said there was no man that came into the house. I'm guessing Annanias Mathe threatened them that if they said anything, he was going to kill one of the kids or kill the kids or whatever the case was. So the man actually denied that there's no man in this house. But so the security officers started leaving. Just when they was about to take a corner, the man started calling them back and say, yep, the man is in the house. The security officers came back and they caught Annanias Mathe. So while they had Annanias Mathe and leading him to the van, Annanias Mathe had his orange t-shirt wrapped around his left hand. And so out of the blue, so he was sandwiched between the two officers when Annanias Mathe suddenly pulls out a knife and turns around on the security officer behind him, and he stabs him in the eye, basically shattering this security officer's eye. And then Annanias Mathe makes a run. When he makes a run, so while the security guard was busy bleeding, he took out his pistol and shot at Annanias Mathe, but Annanias Mathe continued to run. The officer fired again. Annanias Mathe continued to run, and the officer once again fired her third shot, hitting Annanias Mathe, who fell down on the ground, and that's how they arrested him. And while they were arresting him, they also called the ambulance, where Annanias Mathe was taken to a Tembisa hospital. Ironically, when Annanias Mathe arrived in South Africa, he lived in Tembisa, so it was almost like a full circle for him. And then he lands up in Tembisa hospital, where he will not see his freedom ever again. So another side note that is important, I think, Annanias Mathe was tested, actually. I don't know if he was tested by specialists while he was in prison or before prison, but he was said to be a very intelligent man. He had a very high IQ, and then even back home in Mozambique, apparently he was a star in mathematics. Basically, he was very talented when it came to math, and he was like an A student back in the day when he was a student. And so when he was caught, I think specialists as well here in South Africa did test his IQ and discovered that he had a really, really high IQ. He was basically short of being called a genius. So in January of 2007, Annanias Mathe finally stands trial. Now, it is said that it was very difficult to look after Annanias Mathe while he was being transported from the C-Max prison to his trial in Johannesburg High Court. It is said that he was always surrounded by police with heavy machine guns. So throughout his trial, Annanias Mathe would be described by the media as a very small man. And his victims would describe him as pathetic and could not believe that they were violated by a man that looked like that. And this is where I actually get confused once again, because during his trial, it was discovered that Annanias Mathe had military training. So how is it possible that he has military training and it was said that he was working for the Mozambican armed force, and yet the investigators found that actually that was not true, but at trial he was discovered that he had some military training. So during his trial as well, Annanias Mathe was described, let me read it to you. He was well-spoken, well-mannered, soft-spoken, as well as shy at times, and he would have a permanent smile on his face. Some even said he was charming. He had a charming nature, and that is why it was a little bit difficult to believe that a tiny little man like that, who is soft-spoken, well-spoken, as well as intelligent, would do something like this. No, unbelievable. So when Annanias Mathe's trial was concluded, the judge found Annanias Mathe guilty of all the charges that were laid against him, which I am going to tell you what these charges were, and he was convicted to over 400 years imprisonment. Interestingly, the judge felt that it's impossible to send a person to hundreds of years imprisonment because human beings do not live that long anyways. So as a result, he sentenced him to 54 years imprisonment. However, these are the crimes that Annanias Mathe was convicted for. Some of them, they say he murdered 5 people, and I don't know who these 5 people that he murdered. I tried to dig a little bit deeper. Who exactly did he kill? However, there have been some mysterious disappearances and deaths that happened, and these people that either disappeared or died were supposed to testify against him. So here are the crimes that he was convicted for. So please do allow me to read them. Annanias Mathe's crimes were 19 house break-ins. He broke into 19 homes. 3 provinces he had committed the similar crimes to. That was Limpopo, Northwest, and Gauteng. 24 cell phones were stolen during his crime spree. 13 number of dogs that he had killed by poisoning them. 7 number of women Mathe raped during his crime spree. 3 number of people Mathe shot after breaking into their homes, basically 3 attempted murders. 64 number of charges for which he was convicted for. 2 number of police officers who were supposed to testify against him mysteriously died. 2 number of witnesses also mysteriously disappeared that were supposed to testify against him. 146 exhibits that were presented in court during his trial. 150 number of people testified against Annanias Mathe, and 54 number of years he was set to serve behind bars. And interestingly, I did do a little bit more reading because I was interested after he got convicted and sentenced to prison. Did he ever try to escape again? And the Houdini of C-Max, indeed, in 2013, while he was serving in yet another inescapable C-Max prison in South Africa, located somewhere in KZN, a place called Kokstad, he did try to escape. Basically, he tried to break into a wall. Unfortunately, he managed to break a sink. As a result, he was caught by a prison guard. Now, the prison guards, this is what they said about the Kokstad maximum prison, which is also inescapable. So Annanias Mathe was taken to two C-Max prison, one in Pretoria and the second one in Kokstad, somewhere between Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal. So the C-Max prison, basically these are the items that they give you: a toothbrush, a mug, and a plastic spoon. So how was it possible that you'll be able to break free from such a prison setting? And another thing, the prison ward says that all the C-Max prisoners, they are always shackled both hands and feet 24 hours, and they are also watched 24 hours. And then again in 2016, that's 3 years later, Annanias Mathe tried again to escape from the Kokstad C-Max prison by trying to chisel his way out of prison. Unfortunately, once again, he was caught and put back in prison. So the prison guards were interviewed and they said something about Annanias Mathe, and they said, and I quote, Annanias Mathe appeared to have had high-level training. I think once again it takes us back to the military training that never existed, yet existed, but didn't exist, and yet existed. My head at this point in time is spinning exactly who this man is. He can use anything as a weapon. His hands are a weapon, the prison guards said about Annanias Mathe. I don't know what you guys think. Do you think he really had military training? Do you think his hands are his weapons, or he's just a smart man? I think he's just a smart man. I think I can actually comfortably call him a genius. Who makes such attempts in any prison for that matter but Annanias Mathe? He's got gall, definitely has balls, and he has the brains to also do it, and also money to bribe some prison wardens. So while Annanias Mathe was serving his prison sentence in Kokstad C-Max prison, he unfortunately started to suffer from digestive problems, and he started looking frail and very ill looking, and as a result the prison did not believe that Annanias Mathe was ill. They thought it was one of his plans to escape if they took him to a hospital for treatment. And a month later, on the 27th of December 2016, Annanias Mathe died at the age of 41. Again, a 41-year-old grandfather. Interesting. So Annanias Mathe died at the King Edward VIII Hospital in Durban. While some people unfortunately do not believe that Annanias Mathe actually died, they think he did escape eventually. And the Correctional Services in South Africa feels a little bit embarrassed to actually tell South Africans that he has escaped because of whatever failures they may be experiencing, and they thought the only thing that South Africans would believe is that he fell ill and died. I don't know what you think at home. Please do comment down below and let me know if you think Annanias Mathe did die, or he actually managed to do the impossible and escape yet from another C-Max prison that is inescapable. So that is it, guys, about Annanias Mathe, the notorious Houdini, as he was also dubbed as, Houdini of C-Max prison. So thank you so much for watching my very first true crime story about this monster, I think. I'm definitely going to see you again in my next video, where again we'll be talking true crime. I'll see you. Goodbye.